Waking up in a dark house, now looking like a malnourished boy, Haruto is confused. His memories mixed up. He isn't sure if he is Haruto, a young man from Japan, or Ryo, a boy from the kingdom of Beltrum. Suddenly, some shabby-looking people reach out to him calling him Ryo. They tell him he passed out from an illness the day before. As the people start eating, they tell him he stinks, sending him outside to take a bath. Exiting the house, Haruto remembers he used to be a 20-year-old student living in Japan before he died in an accident. Confused, he chooses to ignore Haruto's memories, remembering he is Ryo, a poor boy trying to avenge his mother. In the past, he was living happily in a country house with his mother. She told him how they are immigrants and that his father and grandfather came from a country where everyone has black hair. One day, she got murdered by someone. Back in the present, 4 people in white hooded robes approach Ryo, asking him if he saw a purple-haired girl. He gets intimidated by them, but a white-haired girl among them called Seirei kindly introduces herself to him and asks again. When he tells her he hasn't seen the girl, Seirei casts a spell to detect nearby magic users. She notices Ryo has a lot of magic energy and an aura that nobody except him and her can see. Unable to find the girl, Seirei pays Ryo for his help with a bag of coins and the group leaves. Hiding the bag of coins, Ryo goes back to the house he woke up in, but is suddenly stabbed by a masked man. Luckily, the attacker's sword hits the bag of coins around his neck instead of stabbing him. As the masked man prepares to continue his attack, time stops and Ryo suddenly sees a vision of a pink-haired girl. Touching his cheeks, she teaches him how to use magic. As time continues flowing, Ryo remembers Haruto's knowledge of martial arts and punches the attacker, stopping him. Casting a spell the mysterious girl taught him, Ryo increases his physical abilities and becomes faster and stronger than ever. He dodges every one of the masked man's attacks and knocks him out. Noticing a voice coming from a bag in the back, Ryo opens it and sees a scared purple-haired girl inside. She asks him to return her to the royal castle, but suddenly sees a dead person beside her and faints. Outside, the people in white robes from before see Ryo carrying the girl they're looking for called Flora. Misunderstanding that Ryo knew where Flora was all along, they restrain him and take him to the castle, where he will have to explain himself. Realizing he has no choice, he goes with them. Later, the royal guards inspect the house where Ryo was attacked, finding a single survivor. Before they can question him, however, a mysterious hooded figure crushes a crystal in his hand and the survivor suddenly dies, foaming at the mouth. In a dungeon beneath the royal palace, Ryo is treated cruelly by Charles, the vice captain of the royal guard. Charles wants to make him confess for kidnapping Flora, the second princess, but Ryo refuses, being innocent. Charles continues beating him anyway, insisting he confesses. Flora wakes up in her bedroom and Seirei, together with a pink-haired woman called Vanessa, tell her what happened. Flora immediately asks them to take Ryo to her. Back in the dungeon, Charles continues beating Ryo. Entering the dungeon, Vanessa and Seirei are horrified when they see how Charles is treating Ryo, telling him he is innocent. After setting Ryo free, Seirei heals him, and he passes out. When Ryo wakes up in a bed, Seirei apologizes to him and tells him the king wants to thank him for rescuing Flora. In the throne room, the king is sitting on his throne with the queen and the princesses Flora and Christina. Ryo is brought in with his hair cut and in proper clothes, having been cleaned up. As thanks for saving his daughter, the king allows Ryo to attend the Royal Academy's primary school. One day, Seirei, being a teacher, introduces Ryo to the other students in his class, but everyone makes fun of him for being a commoner. After school, Ryo visits Seirei at her research lab so she can teach him how to read and write. She reveals she is only 12 years old but is so brilliant she skipped every grade until graduation. Later, Ryo and his class have combat lessons, sparring with each other using wooden swords. Since he remembers the martial arts he learned when he was Haruto, he is good at sword fighting. One day, Ryo suddenly remembers Miharu, Haruto's childhood friend. Angry at himself for thinking about Haruto's problems, he decides to forget them and keep living as Ryo. 5 years later, Ryo gets chosen as a representative of Beltrum Royal Academy in an exhibition tournament against the royal guards. Later, at Seirei's research lab, he tells Seirei he wants to go on a journey outside the country after he graduates. Since it is difficult for him to live here while being discriminated against, he wants to travel to his parents' homeland, the Agumo region. Sometime later, the exhibition tournament begins. Ryo comes out into the arena. His opponent turns out to be Charles, the royal guard who tortured him 5 years ago. Charles mocks him, but Ryo shakes it off. They start sword fighting, and Ryo manages to parry every single one of Charles' attacks. Angry at Ryo, Charles fights mercilessly, but Ryo knocks the sword from his hands. Reluctantly admitting his defeat, Charles leaves. That night at his house, Charles is drinking with someone and complaining about losing to Rio. His companion is an ominous blue-haired man, the ambassador of the Proxia Empire. When Charles says Rio was there when Flora was kidnapped 5 years ago, the ambassador gets interested. It turns out he is the same man who killed the last survivor of the incident when Flora was kidnapped. One day, Seirei teaches her class about magic. The first spell they learn is lighting, a spell that conjures a sphere of light. The students mock Rio, saying everyone already knows how to use that spell, except him. Rio can't use magical formulas like the others can, but he can use a different type of magic, one which even he doesn't understand. He hides his true abilities so other people don't find him suspicious. After class, a gray-haired boy called Stuart accuses Rio of seducing the female students. Seirei defends Rio and Stuart angrily leaves, warning Rio not to make him angry, since he is from the powerful house of Huguenot. Later, the students take a practical test outside. They have to work in teams to reach a goal traveling through a mountain forest. Alphonse, a brown-haired boy who hates Rio, serves as the commander of the team, which consists of Stuart, Flora, and Christina, among others. Stuart knows about a shortcut through the forest and they all follow his lead. He gives Rio the cruel job of carrying everyone's luggage and he accepts it passively. Suddenly, the team encounters a group of goblins. Increasing their physical abilities with magic, the boys fight the goblins with their bare hands, defeating them quickly. From the shadows, the blue-haired ambassador from Proxia is observing Rio, intending to test his abilities. It seems like he really has a great interest in him. Exiting the forest, the team finds themselves at the end of the path, on a tall cliff. They get ambushed by huge orcs throwing spears at them. When Stuart gets grazed by a spear, he accidentally pushes Flora off the cliff. Luckily, Rio quickly saves her, powering up, jumping down, and pushing her back up on the cliff. Afterwards, he falls down onto the ground. Alphonse gives everyone orders and the team manages to defeat the orcs. The orcs disappear and leave blue crystals behind them. Meanwhile, using magic, Rio safely lands at the bottom of the cliff. Up on the cliff, Stuart gets accused of pushing Flora off the cliff, but he lies that Rio actually pushed him. Flora defends Rio, but everyone else agrees with Stuart. When they continue without Rio, Flora is against it. While they're arguing, a huge minotaur with a giant axe jumps out of the forest. The team casts various spells at the minotaur and try attacking him physically, but none of it hurts him. When they see nothing works, most of them run away, but Flora stays behind to heal the injured students. The minotaur spots her, but before he can attack, Rio appears and cuts off the minotaur's arm with a sword. Telling Flora to escape, he continues fighting the minotaur while dodging and blocking his attacks. Spotting an opening in his defense, he jumps in the air, climbs his body, and cuts off his head in one slash. As he is defeated, he disappears, leaving a large blue crystal behind. While Rio runs away so the rest of the students don't see him, the blue-haired man observes him. Impressed by his abilities, he calls them spirit magic. At Beltram Royal Academy, Seirei overhears a conversation about Rio, who is thought to have went missing. Duke Huguenot, who is Stuart's father, decides to publicly accuse Rio of pushing Flora off the cliff instead of Stuart, who actually did it. Later, Rio returns to Seirei's lab and she hugs him, having been worried about him. Seirei is outraged by the fact that they want to falsely accuse Rio, but Rio indifferent. He thinks the people in power decide what's wrong and that nobody would believe him since he is a commoner. Deciding to immediately head to the Agumo region, he promises Seirei they will meet again and departs. When Rio leaves, Seirei starts crying since she has fallen in love with him. Traveling for 3 days, Rio reaches the kingdom of Galark and arrives in a market town. While walking through town, a hooded person is following him. Browsing the shops for a while, Rio buys some dried pasta, barley, cooking implements, and seasonings. Leaving the town, Rio continues his journey through a forest. Seeing a seemingly unconscious girl on the ground, he approaches her when she suddenly wakes up and spits a poison arrow at him. He kicks her away, but his vision starts going blurry from the poison. When the girl stands up, Rio sees she has animal ears, concluding she is a beast person. Taking out a knife, the girl declares she will kill him. Rio neutralizes the poison with magic and recovers. The girl starts jumping around acrobatically and attacking Rio with her knives, but in the end he manages to throw her to the ground and pin her in place. As the girl struggles desperately, Rio makes her fall asleep with a spell to calm her down. He notices she has a collar of submission around her neck and gets it off, casting a spell he read about in a book before. We find out the girl's name is Latifah and we see her past. She was riding on the same bus as Haruto, died in the same accident, and got transported to this world. She woke up as a slave of the Huguenot family, living in a dungeon, where Stuart would treat her cruelly every day. Back in the present, Latifah wakes up. Rio told her he took off her collar, and she cries with joy. She doesn't know anything about her masters other than Stuart's name. Rio concludes it's the same Stuart he knows from the Royal Academy and that the House of Huguenots sent Latifah as an assassin to kill him. When Latifah tells him she will try to kill him anymore, he sets her free. They are currently in the region of Strahl where beast people are made slaves, so he tells Latifah to go east to a place called the Wilderness. In the wilderness, there is a land where beast people and other demi-humans live together in peace. Since he is also going east, Latifah wants to join him, feeling Rio isn't a bad person. When they set up camp one day and Latifah falls asleep, she starts sleep talking about her parents in Tokyo. Rio hears it and realizes she was also transported from Japan to this place, but doesn't say anything. As the days pass, the two of them travel through different lands, having many dangerous adventures. One night, Latifah has nightmares and Rio uses a spell to make her calm down, when he notices their campfire went out. Leaving the hut, he sees a large wolf, which suddenly disappears in a flash of bright light which blinds him. He uses his magic as a radar and senses 3 demi-humans. 2 of them find Latifah in their hut and notice she has been made to sleep using spirit magic. As soon as she hears that, the winged girl called Yuzuma attacks Rio, throwing him on the ground. She believes Rio kidnapped Latifah. He wakes up chained to a bed guarded by the demi-humans. Latifah runs into his bedroom and throws herself around him, concerned. An old woman with cat ears enters and apologizes for Rio, together with the other demi-human girls. Rio accepts their apologies and a green-haired girl called Afia removes his shackles. The old woman tells him he can stay here and recover. The next morning, the old woman leads Rio through their village, which is covered in nature. The huge tree he saw before is called the World Tree, and that is where Dryas, a spirit of mighty trees, resides. The old woman called Ursula leads Rio into a conference room, where 2 elders, a dwarf called Dominic and an elf called Salvadora, are waiting for them. The elders apologize for the misunderstanding from before and thank him for freeing Latifah from slavery. They want to do something for Rio in exchange, so he asks them to let him stay in the village. He also asks them to teach him about the spirit arts and the way of life in the village. They happily accept. Suddenly, a shining green-haired girl appears floating in the air. She is Dryas, the spirit of the World Tree. Dryas senses the presence of a spirit inside of Rio, presuming he has made a contract with it. But Rio doesn't remember anything like that. Touching Rio's face, Dryas senses an incredible amount of magic energy inside of him. She senses a person-shaped spirit sleeping inside of him. Those kinds of spirits are very rare, belonging to the 2nd highest class of spirits, or even higher. Alfia leads Rio to a house where Latifah is waiting for him. They sit down with the demi-human girls they already met and eat together. After the meal, a white-haired cat girl called Seirei tells Rio him and Latifah are going to be living with her, Alfia, and a red-haired elf called Alma. In the following days, the people of the village teach Rio about the spirit arts and teach him combat, while he helps them in their everyday lives. Somewhere else, 2 people arrive at a cave riding a griffin. One of them is the ambassador from Proxia called Reese, and the other one is a blonde young man. Reese goes into the cave while the young man waits. Coming out of the cave, Reese brings a large black egg with him, giving it to the young man. Together they leave, riding their griffin. 1 year passed since Rio came to the village. At the night of the Grand Spirit Festival, the whole village enjoys a feast. Somewhere else, Reese and the blonde young man rest for the night. Reese gives the other man a red stone to swallow, telling him it will allow him to know where he is. Reese goes out to investigate the area, leaving the young man to guard the egg. Leaving, Reese knows a flight of wyverns is coming for the egg. Hey, thank you for staying all the way till the end. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It takes only a second, but it means everything to us. Have a great day and see you in the next video.